about 2004. Oh dear. Hubby and I, we've got 4 boys between us. They ranged from 13, 14, 18 and 21. And yes, they were all stereotypical teenagers. They all have stinky feet. They all have a different liking of links. Can you imagine what 4 different links smell like in one bathroom? In varying degrees, they spoke in grunts, they wear black, they refuse haircuts, they skip school or work, they stay up late on computers. They have to be nagged to do the same thing every day. Like I said, it's just a regular family, it's all good. And I know it was a regular family because we had regular get-togethers with other mums who had the same teenagers. And we would vent. And we know we're grateful for our families, not a problem there, but occasionally you need to vent. And I did. And I said, somebody asked me if I was ever going to have a child with my hubby, with mates. And I said, well, I can do pregnancy again. No problem. I can even do poo nappies, teething. There's no way I could raise another teenager. 6 degrees of separation, and the words came back to bite me. A friend of a friend of a friend of even another friend. Ended up on my place for another barbecue. I don't know how I get so many friends. And she said, are you sure? Could you really? Could you have my child and give it back to you? I said, oh, you're going to take the heartbeat? No problem. Well, she made lists. I've made lists. We were compatible in our point. But back in 2005, we had grey legislation. That's what they called it. We found it grey. We couldn't find anything to help us. We didn't know what we were allowed to do, what we weren't allowed to do. So we started looking at clinics. Clinics decided that we weren't best friends. We weren't sisters. We didn't know enough about each other. Well, I'll debate that. I know more about my IPs than I do about my sister, than I know about my best friend. I don't know what my best friend thinks about termination or reduction. I don't even know what my best friend's succession plan would happen to be if she were to die. Where would her kids go? More than likely she'll dump it with me. But I don't know that, but I can tell you exactly what will happen with my IPs. We discussed that. We found a clinic in LA that would take the embryos in Sydney over to LA. They would send all the drugs back to me. And we would be shipped to a calendar, we'll call it that. It was very much clockwork. I flew to LA for 4 days. I was transferred. It was just fine. But I discovered that I hadn't explained very much to Hubby. In the clinic, we got ushered into the little room. I got ready, up on the bed. The doctor comes in. It's all nice and clockwork, it's good. He positions himself, my legs, the lights. He took the little skinny tube from the nurse. And then my hubby says, oh look, just like back home in the farm, we do that to cows. And it's like, the doctor and my hubby are talking about cows, and here I am up there knees by the ground. Okay. So, yeah, so I communicate really well with my IP, just not with my hubby. It's great.
2 minutes, Gary.
No, come on. The first transfer didn't work. I had to go back to LA. It's okay. It's okay. People think that that's really strange. Like I was some sort of jet setter to LA, but I didn't see much of LA. I stayed in the hotel room a lot. July 4 is the date that I remember. I know what his birthday is, but I remember the positive day. July 4, 2005. I could hear my IP scream across Sydney. She didn't think it was ever possible. She really didn't. 6 weeks we had the ultrasound. My sister was accusing me of being the sour pig. There was going to be a litter, for sure, because back then we didn't have this debate about how many embryos. It was something that had to be decided between my IPs and I. And the thought of 6 scares, so we couldn't do 3. Even the tiny possibility that there could have been 6, we couldn't do 3. So we had to do 2, but it still scared the pants off us for 4. We found 1, and much jubilation ensued. We didn't tell anybody, of course, at the first 6-week mark, but when we did start telling people later on, the mixed reactions that I got were just, wow. Have you all heard of them? You won't have a hubby, you won't have a child with my brother, but you'll have a child with somebody else. Did you have to sleep with him? So I had to become an educator as well. I had to tell everybody what was going on.
30 seconds.
No, come on. All right, what did I get out of this? I got out of this the best relationship with my kids. I have got teenage boys that know more about their sex education than they ever needed to. My eldest ones have decided that children are lovely, but their girlfriends have put them on the court. They're not getting any. They're actually planning what they will do when they do have children. My kids have learnt to be more giving, definitely. They learnt, well, from just general conversation, they learnt about gay marriage. How do you teach a 13-year-old boy who's never had any exposure to that sort of thing that it's normal? But we did, because we were exposed to that world. Me, PG was fun. I used to do wicked things to the parents. I used to bring them up at 11 o'clock at night and say, I want vanilla slice. And yes, he had to get up and go cold and do vanilla slice. I told him that he had to cut her toenails because we were too fat, we couldn't reach.
We've got to get you to wind it up in about 10 seconds.
And she said, what's my job? I said, you have to trust him while he's cutting your toenails. But Lachlan was born in 2006, and he is the little miracle. Yes, we've tried many, many times later since, and 5 minutes is not long enough. Come on!
I know it's not, but we're running into tea time.
I know. But if you want to hear about the differences of clinics, different drug regimes, I was at 3 different clinics over the years, and the different lawyers, now watching the changes in New South Wales. I won't say I've seen it all, but I'm a bit like Lisa, I'm a little vintage.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen and I'm an intended parent, I guess, or was, now I am a parent. I'll just give you a background from my sheets here of our story. My husband Ian and I are the very proud parents of a baby boy, Thomas, who is almost 2 in 2 weeks' time, so he's really not a baby anymore. Thomas was an IVF gestational surrogacy baby, lovingly carried by his auntie Christina. So how did all this come to be? Well, I'll hopefully give you a brief background to this. It was discovered when I was young that I was infertile, and this was a devastating blow to both my parents and my family, and eventually, of course, to myself. From that time, I became determined to somehow become a mother, and one day, whether it was through adoption or as early as back then of this new fangled thing called IVF, so this was about the mid-1980s. When Ian and I married in 2000, we waited the required 2 years and then applied to do the local adoption workshop. This certainly opened our eyes to the reality of adoption. We soon learned it was now a very different and a much more difficult process. There were just so many other worthy couples like us at that workshop, desperate to adopt. And we were told, basically, that there were very few healthy baby adoptions. But we were given a caseworker, and in the meantime, we discussed other options just in case. I remember I dug out a magazine article I had kept from 1990, it was from the Who magazine, telling of a surrogacy in America involving a very well-known celebrity who had suffered many miscarriages and eventually had a hysterectomy. The more we read it and the more we thought, perhaps this could become an option for us. So months later, I rang our caseworker and I explained we were trying to make a decision about what to do, and could she tell me where we were at and what had the adoptions been for that year. We had a long conversation, and at the end I thanked her and told her we had decided to pull out. A decision was now made, we were going to try surrogacy. So we eagerly read, researched, and asked everyone we knew on how we could make this happen. Just as we were talking about before, there was no such thing as Google, there was absolutely nobody I knew who'd ever done surrogacy. So we ended up seeing Professor John Leeton, the specialist who was involved in the first IVF surrogacy in Australia with the Kirkman sisters in 1988. He was very helpful, but he was due to retire within a year, but he also explained to us how complex the law was now in Victoria at that time. We then went to Dr. Russell Dalton in Ballarat, our hometown, who was absolutely fantastic. He helped us come up with a realistic plan, and then we went about going to Melbourne IVF, then Sydney IVF, and eventually, after lots of organising, testing, cancelling, etc., 8 embryos were created, and we sent them to a London clinic where my best friend, who had offered at the time to be a surrogate for us, was living. Unfortunately, this journey was not to be, and it resulted in no successful pregnancies, including a miscarriage. During this time, Ian's brother Phil and his wife Christina were also having their own IVF journey, which gave them their beautiful children, James and Lucy. Being very close to both of them and sharing our heartaches together, Chris came up with a great idea. If the law in Victoria then, as it then stated, that the surrogate had to be infertile, then she should qualify, as she was deemed as having unexplained infertility herself. So we put this to Russell Dalton, our IVF specialist in Ballarat, who also thought we had a case, and with the ITA, and hence we put through a proposal for us. In January 2009, Russell rang me on a Friday evening to give me the great news. We had permission to go ahead. We'd been halfway around the world, and now we were coming home to do IVF surrogacy in our own hometown.
2 minutes, Karen.
Then began the waiting again, but after more testing and cancelling, finally in September of that year, one precious embryo was transferred into Chris. 2 weeks later, the pregnancy test was positive. The next 9 months went by relatively smoothly. I put this down to Chris as she was amazing and nothing fazed her. I relished in watching her little bump bloom, and poor Chris, I just loved being with her and soaking it all up. We were all excited as the due date neared, and finally, 12 hours after the due date, Thomas Francis Patrick Taylor came into the world and straight into my arms. It is so hard to put into words what happened or how we felt that day, but one thing I can say, there was a lot of happy tears, lots of love, and topped with it a lot of laughing and a lot of eating of jelly snakes. I'll just read a couple of quick things. When we put an announcement in the paper, a friend told me a great quote, so I put this at the end of the paper. I think it's a great thing for everybody, and it's just a simple quote, and it just says, "When you believe in the impossible, the possible happens." And I really believe that's true. And just one other little thing, a few months later, actually on the 24th of November of that year, we went to the Ballarat courthouse, and we became Thomas's parents, basically, through a parental responsibility. It was very easy, actually. We couldn't believe how easy it was. But the nicest thing that happened out of that was the judge sent me a present and a card and everything after it. He wrote some lovely things in a book. But this was the card he wrote to us, and it says, "Karen and Ian, as you may imagine as a judge, one sees some pretty unpleasant things from time to time. I spoke to a colleague on Monday afternoon and told her that I don't recall a nicer moment in any court than the sight which greeted me as I come onto the bench today. What a cherished and special child Thomas shall be. Well done to all of you."
So I'll just give you all a background on my history. I've been involved in the infertility community now for about 7 years. I started out as an egg donor, found an online website called Aussie Egg Donors, which I ended up taking over the administration of, and I ran that for 6 years with a friend in New Zealand. From there, I progressed on to surrogacy. It just was a natural progression for me. I'm a traditional surrogate, so I use my own eggs. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. What else? Okay, so all the couples that I've donated my eggs to and that I've been a surrogate for, I've met online. So I haven't had any friends that have been infertile. So I really had no idea what it was like to be infertile, personally. But I found my first couple in Perth, and we started home insems, and after the 8th try, seemed like forever, we finally got pregnant. And 2 weeks later, it turned out they were also pregnant. So it was a bit of a shock. Unfortunately, I did miscarry at 11 weeks, but they went on to have a healthy baby boy and have since had another baby. I'm very happy with their family. The second couple I did surrogacy for were actually my first egg donor recipients. They couldn't carry the second time, so I offered to be their surrogate, and were lucky enough to use the leftover embryos from my donation for that surrogacy. And before this, I actually worked with the parliamentary committee in Queensland in getting the new law passed. I entered a submission and I spoke in front of the committee to tell my story and that sort of thing, and it actually did see a lot of my ideas being adopted into the bill, which has now been passed on to the law. And so, yes, my first successful surrogacy was for my first egg donor recipients. The law passed in February 2010, and Regan was born in March 2010. So we were a post-commencement surrogacy. Worked out really well. It was an amazing experience. We had no problems. And was sure that was it for me. Of course, my husband didn't agree, even though I assured him that was it. And 3 months later, I was thinking of it again. My husband just nodded his head and said, okay. Luckily, I have a very supportive family. So the second successful surrogacy that I attempted was for a gay couple that I met on an online forum called Bubhub. And yes, we had a lot of trouble with the clinics that they weren't happy to treat us because we were traditional surrogacy. So we did home insems again as much as I wanted to do it by the book, and ended up with twin boys, yes, that were born at 27 weeks prematurely after a placental abruption in September last year. And they're now 8 months and doing fantastic with no adverse effects on their prematurity. And that's me.
Thank you.